Okay, you said he's in here?
Yes, the dragon rests in the cavern below.
And you're sure it's a dragon? Did you get a good look at him?
Who dares enter the domain of Smaug the Dragon?
Well, that answers that question.
What's the plan? Should we hire a knight?
No, we have a bard. Excuse me? You have a terrified bard? I'm not going down there to fight a dragon. I'm not asking you to fight it, Finton. I just want to know why it moved into Lord Devereaux's basement.
I prefer the term cavernous depths, if you please.
Fine. We need to figure out why a dragon moved into Lord Devereaux's, cavernous depths. God, there's gotta be a better name for that.
You know, now that I hear it out loud, I tend to agree, cousin.
Quiet, all of you. I've spoken to my fair share of dragons. Perhaps I can help this one see reason. Okay, good luck, Finton. Go get him. Mr. Smaug, sir. I'm coming down.
No, do not approach. I will bathe you in fire and flame.
You know, my dragon Zaya once said the exact same thing to me. She has quite the temper on her. She's a teenager.
You have a dragon?
Yes, indeed. You know, I'm sure she would love to meet you as well.
No, you lie. There are no dragons left. I am alone.
Well, that's certainly the story in Devine's history, but history rarely offers the full story. Now, perhaps we can talk and... Oh my.
No, come no further.
Friends? I think you should see this. What is it, Finton? Is everything Oh.
Oh no, has the dragon devoured the poor bard? What's happening? Oh my.
Do my eyes deceive me? Or is this dragon rather small in stature?
I believe we have all been conversing with his shadow.
No! Do not gaze upon me! I'm super scary. I'm gonna burn all of you.
Hey, little guy, it's okay. We just want to help.
I'm not little. Get back. Don't look at me. I'm big and scary.
Guys, back up a few steps. Okay, how's that, Smaug? Any better?
Yes, much better. Now, what do you want with Smaug the Dragon?
Well, we were wondering if we could talk to you about your hoard of stories and art that you have down here. You see...
What Bradley is trying to say is that you've stolen from my private collection, and I'm here to take back what is mine.
What need do you have for stories?
The Viscount and I sustain ourselves on stories. We need them to survive.
Wait, really? Me too!
Wait a moment. The dragon is like us?
Oh my, this is quite the twist, as you humans say.
Okay, alright, everybody just wait a second. I've got an idea. Oh no, what are you cooking up in that mad gourd of yours now? Oh, you know, Finton, just a big old writing challenge. Let's leave Smaug alone for now. I need to message the circus dragon. I have ideas. Alright, but what about the Saved as Draft podcast? Oh, right, yeah, that's happening too. You know what, let's do that now. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 79 of the Saved as Draft podcast. A big episode this week as we head towards the next big writing challenge over on my publication, The Writer's Journey. As announced earlier this week, I'm partnering with artist and writer The Circus Dragon to host Smaugist's Story Hoard, a month-long writing challenge with art and text prompts beginning August 3rd. I'll put a link in the show notes where you can read the full announcement if you're curious. And of course, we all just got to meet Smaug right now in the intro of the podcast this week. He's a fun new character, and I'm super excited to follow along in his story over the course of this next month during the challenge. A quick heads up as well for dedicated readers and listeners. I have family visiting next week, and they're going to be here the following week as well. So as you can imagine, I am trying desperately to get everything ready. And more importantly, clean the whole house before they get here. So there's going to be some shifts in my schedule and output these next few weeks, but more details on that later in the Next Week on Substack segment of the show. So if you're curious to know how things will change the next couple of weeks, that's when I'll go into more detail. Rambling aside, today's episode will start with our community spotlight, and then we'll get into our weekly shoutouts, followed by power-up prompt stories for the prompt this week written by J.M. Gooding, and then our writing discussion before we wrap up with Next Week on Substack. No interview this week, but stay tuned for news soon, because I will be bringing our next Halls of Pandemonium winner onto the show very soon after family visits, and that is, of course, our middleweight bracket champion, Namita Kaul. Really excited about that. And, of course, I'll be taking questions that you all can submit for that interview, so keep an eye out for that as well in the coming weeks. In the meantime, as they say, the show must go on. So, let's dive into this week's Community Spotlight. This week, the Community Spotlight is on LG Wells. LG is a good friend of mine who I met through Substack when I first joined, and he later joined me in working with the Audio Mazes team. We've since become great friends who share a love of all things horror. This week, I'd like to... No, sorry, hang on one second, there's someone out in the hall. Hello? Someone there?
You really thought you could get away with it, didn't yas?
Assassin dude, is that you?
I have a name, you know.
Oh, you do? What is it?
Ha! Like I'd tell you. That's a trade secret.
Okay, so what do I call you?
Ah, right. I see your predicament. It's not important right now. I'm here to defend LG's honor.
Okay, but I'm giving him a community spotlight. I'm literally honoring him in his work this week.
Ah, right. Very good then. Continue. I'll just listen along. Make sure you're not playing anything funny here.
Okay. Well, I was going to say that LG's work is a perfect fit for horror fans of all kinds because it combines rich detail with thick atmosphere, beautiful word choice, and strong characters.
Hey, did you mention the trailer yet?
I was getting to that.
Right. Continue.
So, one of the first times I had the chance to talk to LG was during a Discord call that I hosted very early on during my time on Substack. He was the only person who showed up. So, we ended up talking about his book, The Trailer, which is about an investigation into a shipping container that, when opened, reveals a horrifying scene inside, and it sets off this whole story. That's kind of the premise there.
Oh, yeah. I love that part.
Right. Well, like many of us, LG's been juggling a lot of stress in his personal life, so he hasn't been as active recently on Substack, and I wanted to give him a spotlight to remind him that we're all still here and eagerly awaiting his return, and nothing has changed. He always will have a place in this community, and that goes for everybody that's been here. Oh, hey, Assassin, you okay, bud?
Yeah, it's just... that was so beautiful.
Thank you. Did you want a tissue or something? You're really going at it over there.
No, I'm fine. I just need to go finish a contract or something. Get my head back in the game.
Right, of course. Okay, well, I'm going to move on to the next segment in the meantime. LG, thank you, my friend, for being an amazing writer and member of the community here. We really appreciate you. And next up, we'll dive into this week's shoutouts. But first, a word from our sponsor. Today's episode of the Saved Us Draft podcast is sponsored by Dragon Mints. Hello there! My name is Finton Marybrook, the greatest storyteller in all of Devine. Due to circumstances entirely beyond my control, the Radiant Refuge Resort is currently closed while we navigate, shall we say, legal issues. Turns out those red shirts are smarter than they look. In the meantime, I have a new business venture. Let me ask, you listening right now, are you by chance a dragon? Right, you're not. What do you mean dragons don't listen to podcasts? That's preposterous! Oh, you're kidding. Sorry. Right, you had me worried for a moment there. Well, as a dragon, I'm sure you've been in one of those situations where you had yourself a lovely dinner only to realize that your flame breath smells horrifically of garlic and onion afterward. It's a shame because your date was going so well, but no half-respecting dragon is going to be seen with someone that has terrible flame breath. What's a reptilian leviathan to do? Well, Dragon Mints are here to save the day. Our proprietary blend of sulfur, cloudberry seed, and good old-fashioned magic will have your flames smelling wonderful in no time. With incredible flavors like fresh-cut grass, clean linens, and the blood of your enemies, you can make sure your flame breath scent matches your unique personality. Find Dragon Mints for sale at all merchants in Devine. Tell them Finton Marybrook sent you, and they may offer you a discount. Probably not, but it doesn't hurt to ask. And we're back. Every week on Tuesday, I post a thread in my subscriber chat where you can share links to your latest work for a chance to be featured on one of 2 shows, including this one. I pick 5 at random each week for this segment where I offer my thoughts and narrate an excerpt from the piece as well. So, let's dive in and take a look at this week's selections. Our first shout out this week is Queen's Quest by Anton Anderson. Specifically, we're looking at the final route here, but the way this story works is that Anton has been releasing a number of paths, allowing readers to choose which way the story goes. A classic branching narrative in an excellent fantasy setting. You get to the end of the opening chapter, and then you find 4 links to possible routes that you can select. Your choices are Route A, drop the chest and ran away, escaping the impossible and therefore suicidal quest, understanding that the queen wouldn't take no for an answer. Route B, accepted the quest. Route C, lied about accepting the quest, plotting to give the chest to rival King Volric. And of course the final route, lied about accepting the quest, plotting to give the chest to the Resistance princess. And this final route is one of my favorites out of all the options because it feels like a realistic choice that Knight Gentle would make in this scenario. Now, to be fair, all these choices are realistic, but this one just immediately jumped out as the most intriguing to me. And without spoiling anything, this route does not go the way you would expect. What I love about Anton's approach here is it makes you feel like you're in a classic fairy tale, but soon you discover there's a lot more going on beneath the surface. The twists and turns are super fun, and Anton makes sure to follow each thread all the way to its conclusion. We see the consequences of your decisions in their entirety, which makes the choices all the more satisfying. Let's check out an excerpt from this final route. In the very center of the clearing stood a makeshift throne on a high podium, allowing the princess in green, light, and practical armor to see far in all directions, and to be seen by her subjects. And indeed, the moment Knight Gentle appeared out of the forest, chained and surrounded by the rebels, her blue eyes pierced him immediately. "What is the meaning of this?" she asked as they approached. "My people relayed your jest to me, servant of the queen, but we can talk seriously now." "It was no jest, dear princess." Knight Gentle shook his head. "Even if I succeed at today's Queen's Quest, tomorrow she may invent something even more impossible, and therefore deadly. I cannot fail her without losing my head, but if she were to lose her head first, I would be free." He tried his best to look and sound genuine, but it was very much against his character, and so he tried to do more convincing. "You have ways of learning news. Confirm that the queen gave me the task. Take the chest and use it to reach victory. We still have time before she learns that I'm here." Slowly the princess descended from her throne. Not unlike the queen, the princess's neck was also adorned with a rich necklace with very bright emeralds. In fact, those emeralds were so brilliant that they were clearly magical. But unlike the tall, feeble-bodied queen, the princess was shorter and as strong as any female knight. Her armor was scratched and stained, and her roughed hand was resting on the hilt of her sword as she approached her prisoner. Excellent stuff. Be sure to check the link in the show notes. It's a really fun read. Our second shout-out this week is The Day I Learned I Won a Book Award by Chital Mehta. This is an article about one author's experience winning an award for their upcoming book, Have You Seen Ramit? There's also some helpful links in here to join the launch team and help spread the word. The article even features a recipe for a dish that appears in the novel, which I really loved. Lots of great info in here, and a well-deserved celebration for the win. Let's check out an excerpt. I could hardly breathe when the editor said that I'd won AWP's novel award. Tears came instantly. My kids and my husband were first confused, but then cheered when they learned more. I barely ate through my meal as I waited for the editor to call and tell me, "Oh, we made a mistake, it wasn't you." I must tell you why the call made my heart full. I had queried 140 plus agents since June 2024 for Have You Seen Ramit. Some agents gave valuable feedback, but eventually passed. I was on the brink of losing it all. Despair filled me as I hit my lowest. I picked myself up and kept querying while putting my energy into a new book. A very inspirational story there that I think everyone should read, so be sure to check out the link in the show notes to learn more. Our third shout out this week is Learning to Keep Still by Valentina Starling. So this is a special one because this story started out as a note from Valentina on Substack asking people for a horror prompt, and when I saw that I had to throw my hat in the ring. I sent over a prompt from the Halls of Pandemonium challenge back in May. It was the one about trauma manifesting physically on a character's body. It's one of my favorite prompts that I've ever come up with, and I was really excited when Valentina said that she wanted to use it. So this story is about a character who's struggling with a strange new occurrence that has their skin slowly turning to a kind of clay or stone. Simultaneously, a sulfur-like smell begins emanating from their body. They try to hide it by buying hoodies in increasingly larger sizes, but the problem just keeps getting worse. Now, that's all I'll say to avoid spoilers, but this was a really good take on the prompt. As someone who's struggled with anxiety my whole life, the part about the hoodies really got me. For me, when the anxiety hits, it always feels like my clothes are too tight, like they're suffocating me. And I got a bit of that here, that claustrophobia with the hoodies, and so I really enjoyed this story. It's fantastic and terrifying body horror. Let's check out an excerpt. I do not know what exactly started it. There was no sudden nightmare or any experience I could remember. It must have been something so small, maybe a specific shift in the light at dusk, or the sound of the pipes rattling in the walls of this apartment. Whatever it was, my conscious mind missed it completely. The body remembers what the mind never notices. It began in the right elbow. I was sitting at the table and reached for a cup when the joint slowly but simply refused to give. It felt heavy, thick, and almost like drying clay had settled beneath the skin. Over the next hour, the color of my skin faded into a dull yellowing gray. By midnight, the heat came. It is a silent suffocation. It does not radiate into the room. The heat pushes inward, tunnels itself deeper and deeper, until it feels like my bones have been stacked deep inside a kiln. My heart tries and stays calm, but every breath tastes hot. That first time, I smelled the sulfur which seeped from my pores and clung to the inside of the fleece. The sharp yellow scent of an old struck match that never quite goes out. So good, I love it. And thank you again to Valentina for writing this story based on the prompt. I really enjoyed this one. Remember, link in the show notes. Our fourth shout out this week is Well Known and Beloved by E.H. Lau. So this is a poem from Edward here, who was recently a guest on the podcast, and he's been doing more poetry lately, which I love to see. In this piece, Edward reflects on the true meaning of the phrase well-known and beloved. He shares a number of familiar names that I personally recognized, people who did great things and were loved for their contributions to creativity. Further reflection here, though, offers up another scenario, where artists or writers are able to meaningfully connect with readers, but their work at large still goes unnoticed. So what about them? Will they ever be, quote-unquote, well-known and beloved? It's a fascinating question, and it calls to mind the power of art to reach so many people, but even if it only connects with a few, it still leaves a lasting impact. I love this one. It's a perfect balance between a personal, reflective, and relatable tone. Let's check out an excerpt so you can see what I mean. But as I list all these greats, I begin to realize just how many other greats are out there, whose names I have never heard of, and whose works have never touched my heart. How even the most renowned greats have works that no one can name, and people who don't care for their art. So then, maybe I want to be like them. Not because they're well known and beloved, because what does that even mean? But because they touched my heart in some way, even if it was just through a single piece of art. Amazing. Check the show notes for a link to that one. It's a really great poem. Our final shout out this week is The Legacy of the Solar Order, Volume 1, Chapter 1, Welcome to the Neo-Atlantic Academy by J. Allen Winchester. Now, Jaden's one of those authors who has countless stories that exist across his imaginings universe and beyond even. It can be daunting to dive into an author with such a wide body of work. So I think this first chapter of Legacy of the Solar Order is a great place to start if you're interested in checking out what Jaden's doing. There's a nice balance here of characterization and world building. It's intriguing without being intimidating. As a fan of Jaden's work, I know that this lore is about to run really deep. But trust me when I say that you'll be well acquainted with the world by the time you get there, so the barrier to entry is very manageable. And if that's not enough to entice you, then check out this excerpt so you can see Jaden's writing in action. As the two teens ran up to the front porch, Skylar stole a glance at the seated driver. He was wearing an all-black business suit, scrolling on a tablet. He noticed the plates were local business as they passed the limousine up to the walkway, so that ruled out any government involvement. By the time Skylar turned his head back around, Matthew was holding a finger to his lips for quiet as he turned the doorknob to the front door. Skylar gulped nervously. The door opened with ease, but the two youths stared at the foyer for a moment before Matthew took a step in. Glancing about curiously, he waved his friend inside. Skylar entered cautiously, nervous about who this visitor could be. There wasn't anyone in the foyer, but that didn't mean they weren't somewhere nearby. "Dad?" Matthew called into the house, making Skylar yip. "Dad, anyone home?"
You keep that up, Skylar whispered, and my luck will rub off on you, dude.
Yeah, that would suck. Skylar gawked up at the comeback, making Matthew grin with amusement.
I'm kidding.
"We're in the family room, Matt," came a deep voice from further into the house. The teenagers poked their heads around the corner to see into the room. On the oversized couch, two men sat close to one another. The taller of the two had a rich, tan complexion and thick black hair to his shoulders. The other was fair-skinned with short, golden blonde locks, leaning into the arm draped around him. This man looked back at the youths with sparkling sea-blue eyes. Amazing work, and another list of amazing entries for this week's shoutouts. So, starting next week, I'm going to pause these until the end of August's writing challenge because I'll be featuring stories from that and some other things, but I'll leave the surprise. But don't fret. My usual Tuesday threads here will open back up again in September, so keep an eye out on my subscriber chat. But again, great stories this week. Thank you to everyone who submitted. Next up, let's take a look at this week's Wandering Prompt winner.
Welcome, one and all, to this week's Wandering Prompt Awards ceremony. Wandering prompts are hidden in most episodes of the podcast here. The first person to post a link to their entry gets a special slot on the following episode.
That's right. Last week's episode had a prompt hidden in there asking you to write a piece about what music means to you. And our winner was Namita Call with The Music in Me. I can't believe that Namita is an amazing poet and artist. That's too much power for one person.
You're just saying that because you can't draw to save your life.
I can't write either. All right, you two, let me take it from here. So, Namita's piece this week is a combination of a beautiful poem and a watercolor painting she did to pair with it. For those unaware, Namita does this with all her work, and it's such an amazing experience to have that art and poetry side by side. The art piece here is inspired by a photo from Pinterest, and it depicts a man playing music on a trumpet beside a tree out on the street. It's the kind of street performer you'd see in a city like New Orleans, and having been there myself, I love that kind of music. But on to the poem. Namita presents a number of scenarios here in each stanza where music finds its way into the fold. Examples include songs written by freedom fighters, moments when the background score of a movie moves you, or playlists that you put on while taking a road trip. It's a beautiful tribute to the way music shows up in our lives, and how it adds texture and weight to our experiences as human beings. Now, I love this piece so much, and this is our final wandering prompt before the challenge starts next month, so I figure, hey, let's celebrate by reading the entire poem instead of just an excerpt. So, get comfortable and let me read to you The Music in Me by Namita Call. Ever heard songs written by freedom fighters? Poetry held by notes at protests? Revolutions riding on words? Inspiration held through chords? Goosebumps at the fore. Beats that move, hardened hearts to tears, silently slithering over the soul, piercing the veneer made of grief, cynicism, and despair, holding down the fort. Ever lost your way while being immersed in a song playing while you drive, or a favorite one that made you wait in the parking lot to hear it completely play out? Have you ever been moved by the background score while watching movies and the unfolding of the story, or felt fear and crescendo while watching horror with the sounds one couldn't ignore? Started your morning or road trips with playlists that kept you awake or in a good mood? Invited sleep or your muse through dulcet tones, or meditated to music to shut out the timer around repetitive chores? Have songs calmed you or consoled, or taken you and your loved ones back to simple mornings that made one feel the day was yours, waiting for you patiently to create memories that returned vividly with those tunes? Has music ever filled silence, eating at your core? The disturbing quiet that feels like doomsday was here? Or hummed a long-forgotten song that brought back a person or time one had long forgotten to miss? You and me, both. Wow, so good. A huge thank you to Namita for submitting something for last week's Wandering Prompt. The hidden prompts will return to the podcast in September after the next challenge, but what a way to close things off for now. Absolutely amazing work. Make sure to find a link in the show notes so you can check out the art and the full piece yourself. But now, it's time to look at this week's Power Up Prompt stories, submitted to our guest prompt, written by J.M. Gooding. All right, so this week's Power Up prompt was written by J.M. Gooding, as I mentioned. His prompts always do well, and this week was no different. Your setting was the first moment, your character was the witness, and your conflict was the cost of knowing. Now, J.M. has graciously taken the time to write up reviews for all the entries this week that he was able to get to before Friday night. I'll be reading his thoughts on each story here in a moment, but first, I'd like to talk about his entry since it seems only fitting that we start there. So, J.M. Gooding's story for this week's Power Up prompt is called That One Time Kira Took Me to Meet the Architect of the Universe, or something like that. J.M.'s titles always tell it like it is with these funny meta stories, and it's become an iconic part of his style anytime his muse Kira shows up, so I just love it. I love the titles. Alright, but let's talk about the story. This story is about Kira! Kira! Arnold, hey, what's going on? Why are you yelling?
Oh, good. I didn't miss the part about J.M. Gooding's story. I really liked it. Kira's my favorite. I like her rolling skates. She's so cool. I wish I could be like her.
Arnold, you've really got a thing for Kira. Do you have a crush on her?
What? No! I just admire her skating. It takes good core strength and lots of cardio.
Uh-huh. Okay, well, the concept of the story here is that JM is trying to write something for his own prompt, and he gets stuck right off the bat. Naturally, Kira shows up to help in her own special way.
Yeah, she's the best. Hey, remember that time we tried to help her rescue Hazel from the underworld?
Yeah, I remember. You all became instant fans of J.M. Gooding's work after that. Alright, so she takes him to meet the architect of the universe, who strongly resembles Morgan Freeman. And I love that touch. It reminds me of how he played God in Bruce Almighty back in the day. Such a good reference. Anyway, at one point, Kira wanders off chasing a butterfly, and...
Wait! Did someone say butterfly? We loves butterflies. Yeah, they're so pretty and free. Just like we wishes we could be.
Hey, you two. Yeah, I'm trying to talk about JM's story for this week's Power Up prompt. It's got a really good takeaway, so I'm just trying to get there. Anyway, where was I? Oh, right, so Morgan Freeman's hanging out with some other guys on a fishing dock, and... Oh, wow, did someone say fishing?
Hey, remember that time we narrated a fishing show?
Yeah, it was a real good time. Get it? Real? Like fishing reel.
You didn't even give me time to react to the joke, but... Yeah, I got it.
Could everyone stop interrupting me for 5 seconds? I'm trying to share the moral of the story here.
The whole piece is a reflection on how writers are very similar to Morgan Freeman, or rather the architect in this case.
Hi, Fenton. Yes, that's right. Much like The Architect, we writers create our own universes, but on a smaller scale. It's a really cool kind of parallel there. Precisely. Universes like Devine, for example. Fenton, I told you the next chapter's done. I just need to narrate it. And yet, here we are, taking an eternity to review just one story in the power-up prompt entries this week. Yeah, because you all keep interrupting me. Aha, right, yes. Point the finger at everyone else. Very good, Mr. Writer. Ugh, you know what? I give up. JM's story was amazing. It was hilarious, it was introspective, and surprisingly profound as always with his work here. You'll find a link in the show notes, and I sincerely hope you have less trouble getting through it than I did trying to talk about it here on the show. Alright, let's move on to JM Gooding's reviews of the other entries this week. Next up in our Power Up Prompt stories this week is The Mute Princess Breaks the Beaker by The Tainted Quill, and here's what J.M. Gooding had to say about this one. The Mute Princess Breaks the Beaker follows Princess Isabel as an overheard conversation leads her to investigate the Imperial Alchemist's hidden research. Simple curiosity ends up uncovering hints of a generations-old conspiracy surrounding the royal family and her own muteness. In a moment of panic, she drinks an experimental elixir, awaking 3 days later with both a voice and fragments of a much larger truth. Rather than receiving answers, she finds herself drawn deeper into the mystery as Evander leads her toward what he calls her beginning. For the scriptorum blurb, the author said they were, quote, testing the limits of what something else entirely means at 1 a.m. I felt that deeply. I really enjoyed how quickly the story establishes a mystery. The story is paced extremely well, and the mystery surrounding the Imperial family, Evander's research, and Isabel's condition creates a reason to keep reading. Isabel herself is a great protagonist, especially because her curiosity and dry observations give her personality long before she ever speaks. It's a very engaging setup, and it leaves me wanting more. There's plenty of unanswered questions in this piece, and I would love to see more. And that's from J.M. Gooding there. Sounds like a fantastic entry for this week, so thank you again to the Tainted Quill for submitting. Next up, we have Those You Would Call Gods by M. Brandon Robbins. And here's what JM had to say about this one. Those You Would Call Gods is a dreamlike conversation between an ancient archivist and the person that archivist has chosen to possibly succeed them. The archivist explains that the universe is only one of countless universes, each forged through violence, change, and collapse rather than creation. Beyond that existence are vast intelligences who treat these repeating universes as a game, betting on how life will develop while the archivist records every outcome. Now tired of the role, the speaker gives the job to the listener, along with the immortality, comfort, and access to all the knowledge, but only if they are willing to witness the death and rebirth of everything forever. This was a strong and unsettling interpretation of the prompt. The direct address makes the reader feel personally invested in the offer. I especially like the idea that the beings the listener considers gods are not creators at all, but spectators gambling on creation from outside of it. The real strength of the story is the cost attached to knowledge. The listener is not just being shown the truth, but they are being asked to surrender their sense of significance and survive the end of every living thing. The final choice remains unresolved, which works well because it leaves the reader considering whether unlimited knowledge and comfort could ever justify that burden. Really good. Loved this one. And that's fantastic. I really love M. Brandon Robbins' work. Obviously, the guest on last week's episode of the podcast here, and our lightweight bracket winner in the last challenge. This sounds like an absolutely amazing entry. So thank you again to M. Brandon Robbins for submitting to the prompt this week. Next up, we have Chapter 12, The Eye in the Well, by Every Root, Every Thorn, aka Genesis McClure. The Eye in the Well continues the story of Jeff McClure as he escapes a desperate battle with the eye-covered roots by traveling to Jianmu, one of the primordial trees connecting existence itself. After an impossibly long climb beyond the bounds of time, Jeff meets a mysterious monk who reveals a startling truth about their universe. Rather than allowing this revelation to shake his resolve, Jeff chooses to hold on to what gives his life meaning. His love for his family, and willingly sacrifices something I'd say is very personal in exchange for greater insight, continuing his journey with a renewed sense of purpose. I thought it was especially impressive how naturally this prompt was woven into an existing work in progress instead of feeling like a standalone story, but it does work as a standalone. Rather than pausing the larger story, the chapter uses the prompt to deepen the mythology of the world while advancing Jeff's personal journey. The imagery surrounding Jianmu, the endless staircase, and the revelation at the tree gives the chapter a strong sense of cosmic scale, while Jeff's response grounds it emotionally. His refusal to let the knowledge of the universe's origin reduce the importance of the people he loves becomes the heart of the chapter, reinforcing the idea that meaning comes from the lives we choose to value. It's an ambiguous chapter to a serial I've already got on my embarrassingly long TBR list. Great insight there from J.M. Gooding, and another fantastic story from Every Root, Every Thorn. They've been doing this for a while now, as listeners will know. Every chapter is part of an ongoing story set in their larger universe, but they still manage to bring in those elements of the prompt each week. It's really fantastic stuff. I'm glad to see that J.M. enjoyed it as well. Next up on our Power Up prompt entries this week is Round and Round by Mina Howell, and here's J.M.'s thoughts on this one. Round and Round presents a cycle of imprisonment, violence, and renewal through the eyes of a speaker forced to watch events from behind metaphorical bars. As a queen is beaten down and stripped of her power, the narrator alone understands that this defeat is only temporary. The poem builds toward a notion that she will remember who she is, rise again, and bring an end to the one who sought to control her. It reinforces the idea that darkness is never permanent, and every ending is just the beginning of another cycle. As with all of Mina's work, I enjoyed this poem's strong sense of momentum and its recurring imagery of cycles, storms, and rebirth. The repeated references to dawn, the earth opening, and the turning of the world create the feeling that this particular conflict has played out countless times before and will continue until balance is achieved. The emotional core comes from the narrator's helplessness as they witness suffering while knowing that hope still exists beyond it. I also liked how the final stanza brings the central theme full circle, ending on a note that is both defiant and optimistic, reminding the reader that even after hardship, another dawn always comes. Wow. Yeah, this is just an amazing review here from J.M. Gooding, and I just wanted to add my 2 cents. Mina's work definitely always makes an impact, and I just love the way that J.M. broke it down here and took the analysis to the next level. This is an amazing review. These are all amazing reviews, but I just really enjoyed this one. As someone who's read a ton of Mina's work, this review really hit home for me. So shout out to JM. This is a great review here. But let's move on to the next one. Our next Power Up prompt story this week is The Risky Betrayal by Bradley Hurt. Here's what JM had to say about this one. The Risky Betrayal imagines the birth of the universe through the confession of an immortal who witnessed the event firsthand. When the mysterious one is unexpectedly defeated in a contest among the immortals, her anger destroys their realm in a cataclysm that becomes the creation of the universe itself. As punishment for revealing the truth, the narrator is cast into exile, left to drift through the newly formed cosmos while reflecting on the cost of defying absolute power. I enjoyed this story's inventive twist on creation, reimagining the very real Big Bang Theory as the consequence of a cosmic rebellion rather than a natural cosmic phenomenon. Presenting the story as a final confession gives the narrator's voice a sense of melancholy and inevitability, while the mysterious one emerges as a fascinating figure whose pride ultimately reshapes reality. The idea that the universe exists because of a single act of betrayal provides an interesting answer to the prompt, and the closing reflection leaves the reader with an unsettling thought long after the story ends. Great work on this one. Yeah, that's amazing. I wanted to also call out that I think it was a couple weeks ago we did a writing discussion on the podcast here about creation myths, and one of my oldest stories that I sincerely hope to bring back and revive one day. It also had its own explanation for the Big Bang that was like part of the story. That being said, Bradley's approach here is incredible. I love this idea that there was stuff happening beforehand, and that betrayal is what kicked off our universe. Really cool stuff. Fantastic work as always from this very, very talented author. And moving right along, we have Knights of Memory Carry On by E.H. Lau. And here is what J.M. Gooding had to say about this one. Knights of Memory Carry On follows a knight who inherits the burden of memory after witnessing the truth of Ragnarok through the memories of Munin, Odin's raven. Guided by a dying knight, the protagonist learns the truth about the fall of the gods and the greater struggle against the Great Nothing, an ancient force that erased itself from history. With the old knight's death, the burden of preserving knowledge, carrying hope, and continuing the fight passes to a new guardian, ensuring that the memory of what was lost will not disappear with those who came before. I really enjoyed how this story reinterprets Norse mythology and folklore while using it as the foundation for an original narrative. Rather than treating Ragnarok as the end of the story, it becomes the beginning of a much longer legacy carried forward by generations of knights. The relationship between memory and hope is especially compelling, with Moonin serving as a reminder that knowledge alone is not enough without the wisdom to act on it. The recurring theme of inheritance, of burdens, memories, and purpose gives the piece emotional gravity, and the closing image of another knight taking up the mantle leaves the reader with a sense of optimism despite the overwhelming darkness surrounding the world. Really good job here. And just my 2 cents on this one as well. E.H. Lau, Edward always says that he lets his stories simmer until they're ready to hatch. That's kind of, the catchphrase of his publication. And so it's so exciting to see him, manage to get a piece here for this power-up prompt this week. I know it's not easy to write a piece completely off the cuff for him. He usually likes to let it sit, which is totally fair because then you come up with more ideas and you get a chance to edit and you can kind of polish and everything. But that being said, Edward turned in an incredible piece here. Amazing concept. As a fan of Norse mythology here, I really love this twist on it. So shout out to Edward for submitting this week. Really, really cool stuff. I love seeing his name pop up in the prompts when he's able to participate. So thank you, Edward. All right, next up, another favorite author of mine. We have The Human Factor by Hallie Jules. Here's what J.M. Gooding had to say about this one. In The Human Factor, Tom Carlton records a final message from an abandoned laboratory as he reflects on the creation that changed the course of humanity. Once celebrated as the founder of a revolutionary artificial intelligence technology, Tom now finds himself facing the consequences of a discovery that has grown beyond anything he imagined. Through his confession, he explores ambition, responsibility, and the choices left behind when humanity's greatest achievement becomes its greatest threat. I'm going to say right out of the gate, I loved this. It's a great science fiction story that explores the relationship between technology, responsibility, and what separates humanity from the creations it builds. The recovered footage format works well because it places the reader directly alongside Tom as he tries to make sense of what happened and leave behind a warning for whoever finds his message. Tom is not only confronting an external threat, but also the pressure of knowing that his own choices helped create the future he's trying to save. That gives the conflict an emotional center beyond the larger science fiction elements. The story also raises interesting questions about artificial intelligence, human identity, and whether the qualities that make people human can ever truly be recreated. Really great story from a fantastic author, and I just want to mirror that fantastic concept here. Great work from Hallie, another name that I love to see pop up in the power-up prompts, and any prompt for that matter. So thank you to J.M. Gooding for that wonderful review. And great work, Hallie. Honestly, if you're listening, fantastic idea here. I love what you did with the prompt. Next up, we have Waking Up by Mary Ellen Brady. Here's what J.M. Gooding had to say about this one. Waking Up follows the Denovians, an alien civilization that enters a long orbital sleep and wakes up every 11,000 years to observe the changes on a nearby planet they call Solaris. Their final memory before hibernation was a wild, untouched world of forests and massive creatures. When they wake, they discover the planet has transformed dramatically. A tiny bipedal species appears to have reshaped the world. The Denovians must determine whether they are witnessing destruction, evolution, or the emergence of something new. Mary Ellen approached this from an angle I didn't really expect. Not the beginning of existence, but the beginning of awareness. I love the choice she made to reverse the perspective. In these stories, humans are most often the observers. Mary Ellen chose to tell it from the perspective of the higher beings. It's a refreshing inversion. I also liked the 11,000 year cycle that was used in this. From humanity's perspective, 11,000 years is a very long time, but almost nothing for the Denovians. The name Denovians also was not lost on me, referring to one of the early Paleologic periods in Earth's history. I don't want to give away the ending too much, but it ends in a classic First Contact style that left me wanting more. Excellent story. And right there, I love this because J.M. Gooding called out some stuff that I love about Mary Ellen's work as a whole. I always say every time that she contributes to my prompts, especially when it's sci-fi like this, that she brings in these scientific elements in beautiful, subtle, nuanced ways that feel organic within the larger story, but obviously convey much deeper meanings and connections to our world. And her balance of doing this, she always says that she's channeling Michael Crichton. Honestly, I've said this before, I'll say it again. I think she does just as good, if not better. I know he's one of the greats, and I know that's probably blasphemy to some people listening, but I'm so serious when I say Mary Ellen Brady's sci-fi is on that level. So, I love to see another author here, J.M. Gooding, of course, recognize that she can really do sci-fi really, really well. So, and honestly, any genre. Go read her work. Anyway, thank you again. And for next here on the Power Up prompts, this one came in late last night after J.M. Gooding had closed up shop for the night. So I'm going to take over here right at the end for our final Power Up prompt story this week, which is Purple by J.E. Vance, aka Jonathan Vance. So, for those unaware, Jonathan Vance was recently named what I'm calling our SGO of Substack, which stands for our Stalwart Guardian Officer. The joke there, of course, is that I'm building a council since Happy Nielsen named me Emperor of Substack last year. It's all part of Substack lore, if you follow that. And so I'm building a council of closely guarded friends who I know I can trust. And so that joke began earlier this week with J.M. Gooding becoming our Chief Fiction Officer, or CFO. And now we've got Jonathan here, our SGO. More roles to be named as time goes on. But in any case, Jonathan himself is an excellent writer of lyrical, grimdark fantasy, and if I'm not mistaken, this is the first time he's ever done a power-up prompt, so I'm really excited to talk about it here, and I love that I was able to do that with this one. With this piece, he places us into the POV of the witness from the prompt, and right off the bat, you'll notice how the prose here is intentionally chaotic. This is a mind that moves quickly. It notices a lot of things, and if you blink, you'll miss it. The sentences are short, thoughts happen quick, and it immediately gives us insight into the protagonist's personality and character while moving the story forward. I really love it when authors do stuff like this. They present a unique style through the writing voice that really lets the reader immerse themselves into the mind of the character, and it works doubly well when you're in first-person POV like this, so I love this right off the bat. And the focus of the story as it goes on here is color. Jonathan describes color in ways that I really enjoyed. The colors themselves have a name of their own, of course, but a life of their own as well. It's clear that they represent more complex things like fire or life itself, but the protagonist here just sees them all as colors. It's an interesting piece with a style quite unique to the author's other work. In fact, I recommend checking this out and then reading some of Jonathan's other stuff on Substack here so you can compare and contrast the styles, because it really is this awesome shift with this piece that he did specifically. It's fantastic stuff, and hey, shout out to Jonathan again for joining this week's prompt. I was so happy to see it. And remember, find links to all these in the show notes as well. But that's it for this week, and I want to just take a second to thank my friend J.M. Gooding again for not only giving us an amazing prompt, but taking the time to read and review all the entries as well prior to Friday night. As many of you probably noticed, he went so far as to restack the stories as well, like I do each week. That takes time, as I know, and I really appreciate his dedication here. So, if you missed this one and you're kicking yourself, don't worry. J.M. Gooding and I have been talking behind the scenes about bringing him back on a regular basis to do power-up prompts, possibly once per month moving forward, starting in September after the next challenge. I welcome the help. It saves me a ton of time, and he does really great work, so I call it a win-win. And hey, if you're keen to try your hand at writing a power-up prompt one of these weeks, let me know. My DMs are always open. But in the meantime, let's get into this week's writing discussion after a quick mindful moment. Hey there. This is Chill Bradley, here with this week's mindful moment. Once more this week, I want to share a recording of a poem that I wrote last year. It's about AI, but not in the way you would think. It's a piece about how I feel when I see AI-generated writing or art, how it makes me feel as a creative. It's a poem called Funhouse Mirror, and it's one of my favorites that I've done. Given everything that's happened this week, I recorded narration for it, and I'd like to share it with you. So, for this week's mindful moment, I'd love it if you could reflect on this piece as you listen along. Take a few minutes to think about it. Let me know if there's a line or stanza that stood out to you. Feel free to let me know in the comments. And without further ado, here's my recording of Funhouse Mirror. It was like looking into a funhouse mirror. You tried too hard to emulate me clearer, stitching together pieces of my art. You had it all wrong from the start. You seem to think that making art is easy. Showing my soul doesn't make me queasy. All it takes is technique and pace to transport people to another place. I never said you could take what I made and tear it apart, leaving it splayed, across your vast servers and many faces. One prompt, then it's off to the races. I see reflections of real art in that glass. Art crafted, but now it can't pass for anything other than a poor imitation. A computer rising well above its station. To say nothing of the untold theft and the looming potential death of humanity's greatest and oldest power, needed more than ever in this final hour. It's not that I don't want others to have art. Creativity should be human from the start. Born after ideas and inspiration collide, not from something that has neither lived nor died. Thank you for listening, my friends. And remember, tune in every Monday to my other podcast, Dream Drafts, where you can join me, Chill Bradley, for 15 minutes of guided meditation and reflection, specifically for writers and creatives. I hope to see you there. In the meantime, thanks for listening. Back to the show. All right, and we're back. This week's writing discussion was all about the monsters we make. The timing here isn't lost on me either, given that AI is indeed its own beast. I didn't plan for things to line up like that, but hey, you know, this week I wanted you to tell me about the monsters in your stories. And these discussions will be on pause starting next week through August for the upcoming challenge, but come September, you'll find the writing discussions like this every Wednesday in my subscriber chat. And remember, if you take the time to respond, I'll take the time to read your answers on the show. So, let's dive in and see what everyone had to say this week about the monsters we make. First up, Mina Howell says, I think I've definitely got to talk about the Howlers, lol. They are seriously the coolest monsters I've made so far, and I love how their grief manifests in their physical appearance. I really wanted them to point out how, even despite our best efforts, our trauma can fundamentally change who we are for better or worse. While that doesn't make us any less, it's definitely something that can help people understand others better and hopefully be a little more tolerant. Yeah, and so I just wanted to add some context here as well to Mina's response, which is amazing, by the way. The Howlers are actually creatures from her Ophiocordyceps books, which if you haven't checked those out, please do. They're really good apocalyptic horror, very similar to the vein of, say, like Resident Evil, if you're a fan of those games. It's really, really cool. I was able to contribute a little bit to the series as well through one of the villains. But anyway, I could go down a whole rabbit hole there. Point is, Ophiocordyceps from Mina Howell does have these creatures, the Howlers, and I remember when she first told me about them, how they have their grief manifesting in their physical appearance. Really, really cool stuff. A fantastic way to kick off our discussion this week, and that's exactly the kind of answer I was looking for, was creatures that have a deeper meaning and a tie to a real-world thing. So big shout out to Mina for kicking us off this week. Fantastic answer. Next up, Anton Anderson says, my short story Monster is the very second horror story I wrote. It is a body horror with hideous, stinky, goo-oozing creatures with multiple limbs, eyes, and mouths. There were a lot of inspirations for them. Multiple mouths came from multi-faced creatures from JRPGs and Bayonetta. Also, those mouths look weird in my mind, and that came from Star Wars aliens with upside-down faces. Their mouths are above their eyes, or maybe just open upwards. The goo came from maybe the boss from Dark Souls. And the multi-limb thing came from generic, aka popular, arachnophobic stories that are everywhere. The monsters probably don't represent anything in particular unless I've included something subconsciously. My advice would be to read the draft out loud, to use all the human senses, and to ask beta readers whether the descriptions are clear and easy to follow. Yeah, so shout out to Anton. Check out that story Monster. Definitely love how he pulled from a bunch of different sources here, including some popular video games like Bayonetta and Dark Souls. Love that. Fantastic answer there, and I love monsters that are just, again, like pieces of other things that you've kind of cobbled together. That's terrifying in its own accord. So, great stuff. Next up, J.M. Gooding says, ooh, let's talk about the manager in the Museverse. The manager's prototype was invented in a story I wrote, one of the first horror stories about a fear turned real. Anime wrote that prompt. In the climax, a monster appears made of all my failed and discarded drafts, all of my failed creations, and it steals my physical voice. In the Museverse, I scaled it up. The manager is the monster from Unstitched, but eldritch-sized, and includes all the failed drafts, all the failed artistic projects for everyone throughout history. And then, of course, I get into an argument with it. I describe it as tall, stitched together from scraps that don't match, margins of torn paper crinkling across its ribs, old drafts slithering under its skin, notes and corrections and crossed out lines drifting in slow currents along the surface, veins made of red editor ink, fingerprints turned into sinew, adjectives blistering across its chest, verbs twitching along its arms. It smells like dust and ink, and that specific sadness of closing a notebook because the idea you loved suddenly felt stupid. It breathes, and the air shifts with the sound of crumpling paper and hard drives spinning up and failing. Not loud, just inevitable. Everybody's false starts, everybody's abandoned drafts, everyone's almost songs, half paintings, half sculptures, half lives, stitched into a single impossible thing. And when it speaks, it doesn't echo. It unravels, deep and almost painful, like a sentence you regret writing the moment it leaves your mouth. Wow! I couldn't help but get into that one. That's a fantastic answer from someone who always gives great answers in these discussions. But yes, I wanted to add my 2 cents here. So the first story I ever read from J.M. Gooding was the one he referenced here from Anomie's prompt. Shout out to her. She does great prompts as well. And yeah, that story from J.M. Gooding was so good. It honestly, what he gave us here, the description of the manager, is absolutely a perfect example of why I immediately became a fan of J.M. Gooding's work. I mean, come on. You can't read that and not feel all kinds of things, right? His imagery is on another level. This is incredible. I love this answer, and I love this description. Thank you, my friend, for this amazing response. Next up, Hallie Jules says, in my not yet published novel, A Court of Books and Coffee, my characters are pulled into an unfinished romantasy manuscript that is shaped by their real-world lives. Case in point, one of the monsters they encountered in the Forbidden Swamp are ghostly projections. Think like Dementors meet Force ghosts from Star Wars. Of everyone they've ever ghosted, from the dentist's receptionist to ex-fiancés to even each other. The funny thing is, I thought of this monster after listening to the song Anti-Hero and the line that says, when my depression works the graveyard shift, all the people I've ghosted stand there in the room. Hence, when dusk falls, suddenly all the people my characters have ghosted stand there in the swamp. And they serve to not only psychologically torture Callie and Nate, but to physically separate them from one another. It's honestly one of my favorite scenes in the whole book, and I wish I could say more without major spoilers. There's also a sentient forest later in the book called the Whispering Woods. It's full of ent-like trees that are grumpy as hell, and when someone trespasses, they literally take them captive by taunting with their lives' greatest regrets and ensnaring them in brambles. But, you know, I'm just a cozy rom-com author. What would I know about psychological horror? LOL. Oh, that is such an iconic response from Hallie. I love it. Yeah, no, her manuscript, A Court of Books and Coffee, I've heard so many amazing things about it. It is going to get published one way or another, and when it does, it's going to take the world by storm. Mark my words. And we have a perfect example of that right here. The monsters in the Forbidden Swamp are so cool. I love the concept. I love this idea that ghosting applies to everyone that you've ever left hanging. It's really interesting. And then the second example here, the Whispering Woods, another great example. I love how she takes the characters into this world and then makes the world reflect the characters themselves back at them. It's really, really cool. And just one example of why she's such an amazing writer. And yeah, she's definitely a cozy rom-com author. I mean, check out her sitcom piece. It's All Greek to Phil, right? Totally different than what we just read here, but that's what makes a great writer. Someone who has that flexibility, who can jump between different genres. And Hallie's absolutely one of those. Great answer there. Next up, Gwen Harlow says, my monster is a figurative one. It's smelly, dark, and lives in waterways around us. Most of us can avoid a baby one popping up to drag you in by watching Tide Times, keeping your wits about you and your soul back at the house. But many have already been taken and are now responsible for its insatiable appetite for grief, trauma, and anger, delivering its huge meals with heat and speed. Wow. Thank you, Gwen, for that response. This is fascinating. As someone who does a lot of trauma kind of, symbolism in my work and with my horror, I really love this idea that these monsters in this particular world are all around us and that they've kind of gained an appetite for grief, trauma, and anger. Really, really interesting. You have my full attention, Gwen. That's a great response. Next up, M. Brandon Robbins says, Mr. Haunt, the titular demon/monster from my upcoming novel, preys on the weak by attacking their depression and anxiety. He wants to break people by causing them to hurt themselves and somebody they love. Those who succumb to his torture find themselves trapped in his nightmare house, where he continues to toy with their body and soul. He may slink back into the shadows from time to time, but he's always there, waiting for the next time the cracks start to form. Oh, wow, that's really cool. And I was going to say, with M. Brandon Robbins being my guest on the show last week, if you haven't checked out that episode, please do so, because he does go deeper into this Mr. Haunt novel that's coming out. And I was already crazy interested, but now I'm even more interested. One thing I'll say is that a really cool parallel here is that Mr. Haunt, this description, it reminds me a lot of my character Lord Devereaux, who of course now is, part of the podcast and my writing challenges. But when he was originally created, Lord Devereaux was the star of a short flash fiction horror piece of mine, where, as we all know now, he devours stories, but that wasn't known back when that story came out. So the idea with that story was that he lures a writer into his home, only for the writer to discover that they're now trapped in Lord Devereaux's kind of interdimensional prison, forced to forever write stories for him to feed on. He's obviously become a little less terrifying since then. But yes, there's a really cool parallel between that concept of mine and this Mr. Haunt character here. Obviously, it's different. Mr. Haunt, attacks people's mental health, depression, and anxiety, and then pulls them into this nightmare house, like M. Brandon Robbins said here. But I couldn't help but draw a parallel there. That was really, really cool. And a fantastic monster. Another great example here, another awesome response. Next up, J. Allen Winchester says, looks at Jay for permission, Dragon gives a nod. Okay, good, we have permission. All right, so Jaden says, the very first monster I wrote was the Shadows of the Eclipse Saga. This world originally didn't have shadows because light was always there. It didn't have a source. Then darkness entered the world, and with it the shadows of the heart bled out of people. Some struggled with feelings they'd never felt before. Others were consumed and reduced to lunatic behavior, ranging from hysterical grief to mindless killers. It was the only war ever fought in Aurora, and it nearly destroyed it. Western Wind actually lost most of its gods in a single day. When the sun god was born, the shadows were driven back, but the god has to rest. So when the sun rests, people fear the night. I love that. Many had been robbed of their memories and minds. The shadows now are born from spirits who are not given proper funeral rites. The only way to protect them is to return the body to the element of birth. Each province has its own burial rite to safely transport the spirit to the place they can rest before reincarnating. If the spirit doesn't receive a proper burial, the shadow can reanimate the corpse and turn it into a void creature that seeks out and attacks the light in the living. These shadows are fast, and their only weakness is light sources like fire or light spells. However, the shadows that were still living beings are beginning to return, which are even more dangerous because their emotions make them violently reactionary. The inspiration was the archetype of the shadow, all the repressed aspects of human nature and chaotic emotions we all have. Many moon myths refer to lunacy as an effect of the satellite that can drive living beings crazy, and my 16-year-old mind was fascinated by the madness of lunacy. Eclipse is a moon myth saga, so obviously I had to talk about the wild aspects of the moon. When I got older, I realized how unsettling and heartbreaking their existence was, but I knew that was the threat Samuel was trying to resolve, something logic couldn't reason away. I've made other monsters and things that go bump in the night, but I've rambled enough for one discussion. No, thank you, Jaden. This is amazing. I feel like we may have talked about this in one of our prior conversations, but I love this overview here. I really love the connection to the lore surrounding the moon. I love the way that it plays with a classic like light and dark kind of theme, but you bring so much to it here. The mention of the void creature that comes from corpses that aren't properly buried, it calls to mind games like Death Stranding, for example, and the way that the BTs work in that game, which is of course a compliment because Death Stranding is one of my favorite games and stories of all time. But yeah, no, not surprising that you have yet another corner of your universe here that is just incredibly interesting to dive into. And thank you, my friend, as always, for your wonderful responses each week. This was another great one. All right, next up, Wendy Russell says, damn, I just went down the rabbit hole of everyone's monsters. You lot are a terrifying creative bunch. I agree. I loved reading the backstories behind them too. That behind the scenes stuff is catnip for me. I agree with that too. The monsters in my stories are usually aspects of my characters' personalities, and therefore, as their creator, aspects of my own. Turns out we really are our own worst enemies, and when you insist on writing a character who's essentially just you with a different haircut, that gets confronting pretty quickly. Right now, as I try to wrestle rocking the second act over the finish line, Veronica's monster is that she can't cope with being loved by a man, so she's gone full scorched earth and blown the whole thing to hell. The awkward part is that writing her has forced me to look at my own relationship patterns. You think you've done the work, you think you've healed, then your own fictional character drags you into therapy by the hair. And honestly, that's far more terrifying than any monster I've ever invented. Wow. Another standout response here. This whole week's responses are amazing, everyone. Thank you. But Wendy, this is incredible. I really wanted to get a perspective from an author who, kind of creates monsters in a more metaphorical sense. And that's exactly what we got here with this character, Veronica's monster being sort of an internal conflict. And I love the way you frame this here, because at the end of the day, whether or not we want to, we put ourselves into our stories and our characters. So it is interesting that you can not only see that and recognize it, but use it in your storytelling and then reflect it back on yourself. I mean, that is just true emotional maturity, and I applaud you for it. It's really nice stuff. As someone who's read a lot of Wendy's work, including Rocking the Second Act, I really have to recommend that people check out her stuff. She also does a lot of really great live streams too. So if you're not already subscribed to Wendy Russell, or anyone in this chat this week for that matter, please do yourself a favor, check out their stuff. These are some incredible, talented, wonderful human beings who happen to make terrifying monsters. In any case, our final response this week is from Tales of Pictavia, who says, maybe a bit late to the party, but I'm creating my first monsters for Pictavia. They are Fae-based, and the story is not yet ready for publication, but the illustrations are. And folks, you'll have to go to the chat itself to see that the art that got posted here from this author, but holy cow, I'm looking at it right now for the first time. This is incredible. This is really, really cool. The first piece, I'll kind of give you some broad descriptions here, but again, you're going to have to see it for yourself. This first piece here, it features 3 different faces with varying expressions. The third face on the right is more of like it calls to mind like Nightmare Before Christmas, like a stretched like skin skull kind of look. And then the other 2 faces are more, human, with different expressions. But there's a ton of color and detail here. And then moving on to the next illustration, this one I can definitely see the influence of the Fae. Verdant Butterfly, if you're listening, I think you would like this one a lot. This is a really cool one. But yeah, no, this is just like a really nice detailed Fae-inspired character. And then the third image is a side profile view of a different character. And again, just the style here is incredible. The detail too. Wow, really, really cool stuff. Thank you, Tales of Pictavia, for sharing this. I mean, looking at this art here and hearing your description, I am entirely interested in what's going on. I need to know more immediately. So the art is doing its job. This is really, really cool stuff. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of this week's writing discussion. Thank you so much, everyone, for your responses this week. This was honestly one of the best ones yet. Really, really enjoyed this. Like I said, these will be on pause going into next month, starting next week. Because, as you all know, with the writing challenges, it takes a lot of time and focus and energy. And so I try to give them, all the time they need, while also highlighting work from the challenge. So that's why things like the writing discussion here get paused, briefly during challenge season, if you will. But writing discussions will be back every Wednesday starting in September. So in the meantime, please keep an eye out for all those prompts that'll start hitting in early August. And I can't wait. It's going to be a great challenge. But this was, again, a great way to cap off the discussions for the time being here. So thank you again, everyone. I truly appreciate all of you. All right, let's wrap things up with a look at next week on Substack. All right, so the next 2 weeks are going to be a little different than normal. As I mentioned in the intro, we've got a new writing challenge starting in August, and I've got family visiting the first 2 weeks of the month as well, roughly. It's next week and the following week, basically. So for starters, like I've mentioned a few times already, we're going to hit pause on everything outside of the challenge like normal, barring my podcast, of course. I'm still going to work on the next Devine chapter of the Order of the Pawn because it's pretty much at the finish line. We want to get it out. It's already been way too long. But power-up prompts, Tuesday shout-out threads, Wednesday writing discussions, and of course wandering prompts will be on hold until September. So thank you again for all your patience there. Like I said, we're going to fill that gap with all the amazing new stuff about to come down the pipeline from this challenge, Smoggist's Story Horde. I'm going to be posting the episodes of the Dream Drafts podcast as normal as well every Monday, so don't worry, those aren't getting paused. And if you're a paid subscriber, there is a new episode coming this Monday, and simultaneously last week's episode will unlock as well for everyone. Like I mentioned, the podcast here, we're going to do Saved as Draft, obviously still. I'm not like skipping episodes or anything. I've never done that. But what I will do are some shorter episodes these next 2 weeks, because I'm not going to have as much time to write and record as I normally do. And I have some ideas, so I'll let it be a surprise, but it'll be a, let's say, walk down memory lane as we head into Smoggist's Story Horde in August, a little way to build hype for the challenge. But yeah, once more, for everyone in the back, Smoggist's Story Horde begins August 3rd, and we'll have daily art and text-based writing prompts every Monday through Friday all month. The Circus Dragon has created a ton of new art for this challenge, so keep an eye out because it is going to be absolutely amazing. You're not ready for this art, but I promise you're going to love it. And of course, I want to give a shout out to J.M. Gooding and Leron Haywood, who will be returning to help run the challenge's scoring system, which, for those unaware, tracks your engagement across 3 brackets based on subscriber count. And of course, we'll have a 4th unranked bracket for those who just want to join and have fun. We've got this down to a science, so I hope you'll join us because it's going to be great. But yeah, a couple of weeks of me being less active, and then I'll be back to normal as we get into the challenge. Come September, all that usual stuff will return as well, so I hope you'll stick around, and in the meantime, I want to say thank you again for always being here and listening, my friends. You know, I heard a podcast the other week that did this thing at the end where they tell the listeners how long the script was at the end of the episode, and I thought it might be fun to do that here. So, not counting my rambling and off-script kind of musings during the writing discussion, what you've just listened to was about 8,000 words of both mine and J.M. Gooding's writing. Yeah. Most Saved as Draft scripts are between 7,000 and 9,000 words per episode. It's crazy how fast this all adds up. But, you know, in any case, little fun fact for you there at the end. I'm going to let you get back to it, but I appreciate all of you, and I hope you all have a safe and wonderful, productive week of writing. This is Bradley Ramsey, signing off. Bradley, you're still releasing the next Order of the Pawn chapter before you do another writing challenge, right? Yes, Finton. I'm going to try to get it out this week. I just need to get my lines recorded. Good, because I was worried that you'd use the challenge as an excuse to leave me trapped in limbo for another month. No, Finton, the next chapter's on the way, but you're not getting out this next chapter either. Well, then when? When do I get to come back? Well, I mean, you're going to show up in the past storyline, but... You know what? No, I'm not getting into time travel and timelines with you during a podcast outro. That's way too complicated. Fine. Just tell me how many chapters until I'm back then. I don't know, Finton. What do you mean you don't know? You're the writer. How can you not know? Well, because I have an outline, but I'm also a pantser, Finton. That's no excuse. It's literally the only excuse that makes sense. You know what? Fine. I'm going to hang out with the dragon Smog then. All right, fine. You do that.